Hello, my name is Egon Trujillo, and this is my research survey presentation. So I'd like to begin with an overview of the need for assessment effectiveness and the teacher's role as studied in my research project. Then I want to move on to finding an explanation of how assessment practices at Franklin High School have directly impacted our student success. I'll then elaborate on the non-experimental research design I created for this project and look at some of the relationships between attitude and success as can be found on the survey I created, through which I'll explore some of the data found in that survey. And then lastly, I'll conclude by evaluating my results and then reviewing some of the limitations and possible implications for further research. So to begin, I chose to look at how assessments are either effective or ineffective as can be found through a non-experimental research design. And to begin with, let's look at what the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 left us with. Besides several accountability measures, it also left us with some mandated assessments, such as the SBAC test, which most students are given in the state of California towards the end of the year. But it also left us with some interventions for accountability, such as benchmarks, diagnostics, and they're also known as interim assessments at my school. And there is a lot of research that confirms that the summative assessment or the SBAC is effective because it provides feedback for students and teachers, but it's not really clear if the interim assessments are as effective. And that's why I wanted to investigate this topic for my research, because as can be seen in Konstantinopoulos, Miller, and Vander Plug's article, the evidence for this effectiveness on interim assessments is pretty inconclusive throughout the United States. And so, what I started to look at from their article was a randomized control trial for math and reading titled the M Class and the Acuity, both literacy and numeracy assessments. And what they tried to do in their experimental research design was they investigated the effectiveness of these two interim assessment tools for reading and writing in Indiana, and they set up their experiment and their methodology by splitting up 35 schools and giving them both these two interim assessments, the M class and the acuity, and then they separated another 24 schools which acted as the control that did not get exposed to these two intervention strategies known as the M class and the acuity. And what they found at the end were mixed results because although some students were directly impacted by the intervention strategy, the other half of the grade levels, grade K through 2, they did not see any significant success. So the results were pretty inconclusive. Although their hypothesis was aimed at looking at if student progress throughout the year would help teachers to make better instructional decisions, and in the end find success on the student assessment, this wasn't really the case, as can be seen by the article. And now what I want to do is look at some of the interim assessment practices at Franklin High School. As the new data coordinator for Franklin, I have access to past tests that are given at our school, and I found that last year in the year 2018 through 2019, as found on the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium's California Educator Reporting System, last year Franklin administered the following 5 IABs, known as the High School ELA, in reading literary text, reading informational text, editing, revision, and research. And from that same website, here's some of the data. And from figure 1 through 5, you can see that all of the students tested last year either reported being near standard and some even above standard in English language arts. And so again, last year at Franklin, we administered 5 IABs or interim assessments. And what I wanted to look at now is how did those IABs or interim assessments directly affect the summative or SBAC formative assessment? Well, looking at data from that same website, you can see in Figure 6 versus Figure 7 that the SBAC scores for 11th graders did in fact improve in English language arts significantly. The score from 2017 to 2018 reports a 9 being exceeding standard versus in 2018 through 2019, you can see that 22 students reported being exceeding standard. Now, in order to further investigate this, I wanted to pose the following research question, and that is, will exposing students and teachers more frequently to interim assessments, such as the IAB, help to influence student performance on the summative assessment, or the SBAC, by improving their confidence on the test through repeated exposure? In order to answer that, I posed the hypothesis in my non-experimental research design that if students at Franklin High School are exposed to more IABs, or interim assessments, in the fall, they will perform better on the SBAC, or summative assessment, in the spring. And specifically, what I did was I used Wang and Hurley's article titled Assessment as Scholarly Activity, which contained a survey on attitudes towards assessment, and I adapted some of those survey items. And the purpose of the survey that I created was to rate the attitude of educators on assessments using a 1 through 5-point Likert scale. And there were 5 categories on my survey, but specifically for this project, I want to focus on the last 2, that being the attitude of assessment frequency and the attitude of assessment as a means to improve student learning. This table, data table 1, shows the attitude toward assessment as found through the data collected from University of San Diego students in this class. And you can see all my data was collected here, and it was found from my survey that I had a value of 0.8 for my Cronbach's alpha, meaning that the survey questions I asked were consistent and did in fact capture the respondent's attitude toward assessment. Now, that's important, and specifically, I want to focus on, like I said, the last 2 survey categories, and they're highlighted here in red as they were in the previous slide. And what that data shows, if I zoom in a little further for you here on that Google form, question items 9 through 12, you can see all 23 respondents from University of San Diego. You can see that this captures their attitude of assessment frequency and assessment as a means to improve student learning. And what I wanted to look at now was I calculated a frequency distribution for those same respondents from the University of San Diego. And then I took those answers, looked at the frequency, and looked at the percentage for each of the responses. And looking at this hierarchy data table, you can see that overall, for one of those questions, titled Teachers Should Use Interim Assessments More Than Once in a Semester, you can see that most of the respondents either agree or totally agree with that statement. This next hierarchy table shows similar results, that most, if not all, teachers should use practice tests and lessons from the CAASPP digital library routinely through the semester as a way to prepare students. This question, attitude of assessment as a means to improve student learning, also confirms that most respondents either agree or totally agree that assessment is important to improve student learning. This next figure also shows that teachers in this survey felt that class time should be dedicated to administering the interim assessment to build critical skills. Now, I also did the same thing for Franklin teachers. I was only able to give the survey to 3 of my English teachers, but looking at the frequency distribution for those respondents at Franklin, you can see that pretty much the same results, that respondents felt that they either agreed or totally agreed that assessment, specifically interim assessments, as can be found in Figure 14 and 15, were very important to improve student learning, I should say. And what's the limitation of this study? Well, the limitations of this non-experimental research design is that it's self-reported for both surveys, University of San Diego respondents and Franklin teachers. And so that means that we don't really know how reliable their answers are. The other limitation is that the sample sizes were both small, only 3 in Franklin teacher group and only 23 in the University of San Diego class. Also, there were different backgrounds and experiences of both respondents. For example, respondents in the University of San Diego are all pursuing a master's career, and some of the English teachers that reported on the survey did not have the same background. Also, there was different motivation, I would say, for the respondents because the ones in the English department at my school are directly impacted by this interim assessment data as they are currently administering the interim assessments at my school. But the implications of this is that, as noted earlier, the Cronbach alpha is pretty high, meaning that the surveys do indeed tell us how teachers' attitudes can directly impact how they view student success. And there is a lot of generalizability because the results are very similar. And here are my references for this research project. So in the end, I hope we all learned something, and that is that teacher attitude toward assessment can directly impact student success. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.